This is the Mekong. It's one of the world's mightiest rivers. It's so long that if it was in the United States, it would run all the way from Los Angeles across the country to New York. It starts off in the Tibetan Plateau, runs down past southern China, past Myanmar, and then when it gets to here in Vientiane, it divides Laos on my right from Thailand on my left. It then goes down through Cambodia, Vietnam, and empties into the South China Sea. It's an incredibly important economic and cultural lifeline to around 60 million people who live in the river basin. Many of them depend on it because it's a gigantic fish factory that provides a lot of people with their basic daily protein needs. But not that long ago, something very odd happened on the Mekong, something that many of the people who've lived on the river all their lives say they'd never seen before. Last December, the Mekong suddenly rose by several metres as the river swelled with muddy floodwaters. It was highly unusual as this was during the dry season, when the Mekong is normally so low that people can grow crops along its banks. With no warning about the flooding, it caused havoc. Crops were washed away, fish farms were wrecked and boats severely damaged. For some fishermen, like Den Krulong in Thailand, the damage was even worse.
แต่พอมาปีนี้มันรุนแรงจนเอาแทบไม่ทันน้ำขึ้นมาภายในวันเดียวตั้ง 3-4 เมตรได้เกิดให้เรือของกระผมที่จอดอยู่ทางนู้นและพร้อมกับแพที่เรือหาปลาที่เป็นชาวประมงก็ไหลไปประมาณสัก 2-3 ลำในวันนั้นในวันที่ 20 เดือนธันวาคมปี 56 เมื่อตอนเช้าประมาณสัก 6 โมงเช้าเพื่อนเขาโทรไปบอกว่าเรือมันไหลผมก็ลงมาดูแล้วดูเรือทางนู้นที่จอดเอาไว้มันเรือไม่มีก็เลยได้อาศัยเพื่อน
The river rose to levels not seen in 50 years this time of year. And many people think the water must have been released from two massive dams that China's been building on its side of the Mekong. The reservoirs of the Siawan and the Nuozadu dams can hold enough water together to cover a city the size of London in water 24 metres deep. China's long insisted that these dams are good for countries downstream on the Mekong because they can hold back water in the wet season to help prevent flooding and discharge more in the dry season to avoid droughts. But Beijing's reluctance to share information about the workings of the dams has created a climate of deep suspicion, especially when the river suddenly rises without warning as it did last December. On the other side of the river in Laos, other people were affected, like the Chantabulis, whose peanut crop was destroyed when the waters came up to chest height.
เกี่ยวกับน้ำท่วมเดือน 12 เนาะแม่ก็ได้ปลูกถั่วดินไปแล้วปลูกแล้วกำลังโป่งยอดมันมาบังเอิญน้ำทุกปีก็บ่มีแล้วก็ปีนี้แล้วมาท่วมตายเบิดเสียหายเครื่องปลูกอันคิดอยู่ในใจนี่ก็จักสิแม่นหรือบ่แม่นก็คิดว่าแม่นน้ำมาแต่จีนนั่นแหละจีนปล่อยเขื่อนบ่จังว่ามาหลายปกติผิดปกตินะ
The Mekong River Commission, which is supposed to coordinate shared use of the river, first started asking China about the floods in January. For an official Chinese response, the Commission has to make a formal request through Beijing's diplomatic representative in Bangkok. Chinese officials told the Commission in March that heavy rains had caused the flooding, not their dams. But they gave no explanation for the odd changes in the river's levels in February, when it also rose to record heights for that time of year, although not as suddenly as in December. The Commission repeated its request to China in May, but by July there had still been no response from Beijing. And this means people all along the Mekong have been left wondering when the river they depend on so heavily might suddenly change again, without warning and with worrying consequences for their livelihoods.
บ่าย 3 บ่าย 4 โมงนี่น้ำเริ่มขึ้นมาแล้วเราก็ไม่รู้ทำไมน้ำมันขึ้นทำไมมันขึ้นเร็วขนาดนั้นเห็นไหมแต่ทีนี้พอมันขึ้นมาปุ๊บมันขึ้นมา4 เมตร 5 เมตร 6 เมตรเนี่ยมันขึ้นมาทีเดียวแพเราก็ผูกกันอยู่ต่ำๆอย่างนั้นน่ะมันก็มีการเสียหายตอนนั้นเพราะว่าพอบางคนก็กลับไปบ้านบางคนก็นอนแพแหละไอ้คนที่นอนแพก็โชคดีไม่เป็นไร
China's water ministry told us in a statement that its communication about the dams was unimpeded, pragmatic and highly effective. But if it is, that message is not getting through to some of the people who rely on this river the most. Pilita Clark, Financial Times, Vientiane.